Hey everybody, I'm Tiffany and you found us on the Wise Skies channel. I've got a special guest and friend and authoress with us, Annie Järnsaxa, right? Anneliese Järnsaxa. And I want you to just really pay attention to the words she has to say because she comes to us with such deep intuition and deep magic and deep wisdom, and we're really in for a special treat. So thank you so much for coming, doing a little podcast with me today. And I just want to start by letting people know how I met you, which was through your book. So Wise Sky's sister company is Spellbound, and we just launched Rune Rebellion. And so that's how I first met you. But I want you to tell the Wise Skies folks a little bit about your background, a little bit about the magic and medicine in your life.
Well, thank you for having me. This is
Yes.
very interesting and not definitely out of my comfort zone. So yay me, doing my edge. But thank you for having me. I guess I start by saying that my name is Anneliese Järnsaxa, and I wrote the book Rune Rebellion, and I have been, I think, straddling the worlds of magic and medicine for the better part of 20 years. I'm a longtime nurse. I've been a nurse for 20 years. And I've also been a mystical being, I think, ever since I was very little, and would rush into from my backyard into my, when parents were sitting there watching TV, and I'd run in and I'd be like, hey, grandma said that these plants would be really yummy for like tea. And they're like, grandma? And, and I was talking about my mother's mother, who'd been dead from before I was even around. And so, I'd talk about how, the plants had told me these really interesting things, and they'd be sort of nodding their heads and then go back to the TV, sort of pretend like, well, she'll kind of go away. So there was always this sort of sense that, I think I don't even know that I would say I was psychic, but I certainly was very distracted by a lot of things that it seemed like other people weren't really feeling. Mm-hmm. And then on the other hand, and you'll appreciate this, Tiffany, I'm a sun Virgo, moon Virgo. So there was this other part of me. I was like this internal paradox, right? Because it was like I wanted answers, and I wanted to know, and I wanted to understand all of the boxes and the categories and stuff on one side, and then there was this kind of inner mystic on the other. So I think I've always been this kind of edge walker when it came to, particularly around medicine and magic, and how you kind of keep one foot in each realm simultaneously.
And I mean, I think that's the biggest gift, to have somebody in medicine that has a magical background, or in magic that has a medical, thing to contribute to that. I was also that kind of mystical child, and my dad's a pharmacist, so I had a lot of Western medicine understanding. I went and got my master's degree in health psychology, which was a little bit more woo-woo. But I just love how those things blend for you, and also how it just comes out in the writing of your book too. We're doing this interview because Anneliese is going to teach us a special class on November 10th. We're in 2021. So the podcast is evergreen. You can get some good information about runes anytime, but I do want to just do a little housekeeping and let you guys know that she's going to be teaching us on November 10th. So please register for the class through wiseskiescollective.com. You can also pick up her book there in our shop. I just want to make sure that everybody that wants to come to class does, because this is a really special offering. I know that you're a busy lady. I know you've had a lot going on in October, and I've been dying to ask you, tell me what is witch camp? What is the mushroom camp that you've been doing? Can I tag along with your month of October?
Yeah, well, for all, witches, October is kind of our high season, right? So it's kind of New Year's, maybe Christmas, and your birthday all mixed up into one. But how it kind of defines for witches typically, and I would sort of say I identify as an animist witch, right? So if and I really resist categories. I think probably a larger, more accurate category just be somebody who's mystic, right? Who has a mystical kind of bent in whatever way that happens. But for witches in particular, October's a big one because there's Samhain, right, which is kind of the new year. That's a big holiday. It's also sort of when the veil between the living and the dead gets really thin. You start to feel the changes in the air. So there's this really kind of deliciously spooky. The spirits of the dead are a lot more near us, and there's a lot of ways to kind of reach out into that, which is fun. And the runes, I think, are kind of knocking a little bit louder. Then Witch Camp is a camp that is sponsored by by Tejas Web, which is a local group of reclaiming witches here in Austin, Texas. And I went to that, and then it's mushroom season. So then I'm going to go and I have to harvest mushrooms because that's what you do, right? Mushroom season is upon us. So I'm going to be going to the Rockies and doing some mushroom and lichen collection for medicine, to make medicine. And then, let's see, where else am I going? Oh, and I'm going down up to Palo Duro also, because I just always wanted to go to Palo Duro. Who wouldn't want to see the Texas Grand Canyon?
Oh my gosh, it's so funny that you bring that up, because I was actually looking up land for sale in Canyon, Texas last night. I don't know why. I was on a whim. Yeah. I've been once. It's absolutely stunning. We camped there and hiked and did all the things. And bring your bike if you're a biker, because they have some really cool trails for mountain biking. But yeah,
right. And I mean, that's exactly, and those are the places where you're going to really feel the runes, right? So, I mean, when we're talking about runes, right, and sort of the whole foundation of the way we think about runes, at least in my world, is they're these living, energetic, animate beings, right? These enormous, ancient, energetic beings. And so when you go to places like Palo Duro, you can't help but feel into the spirit of those places and start to sort of recognize, maybe some runic energy that's there as well. Like, I think it's probably I mean, I haven't been there yet. You'd have to tell me if this was your experience with me, but I imagine it's really sort of a whole network. It's a whole web of various spirits, right? You've got the Comanches, and you've got the spirit of the place, the sort of locus animi of the place itself. But then there's also these runic energies that can be coming in there, and I have no idea what else, but plants and trees and all the bioregions. It's like, I mean, it's just going to be heady. I'm really excited.
I'm super jealous. I need to get with you before next October so I get my October plans correctly.
Right, I'm telling you.
Something else we have in common is a background with beekeeping, and so I just wanted to point that out too. That I have been able to share some of my journey with you, of that throughout the last couple of months. The last time we talked, you and we were talking about wearing the runes on your body. And so, you said it, but I want to kind of underline the fact that the way that you teach runes is very different than what I've heard before. A lot of times rune teachers will teach about just the symbol and what that kind of means. So just like how I teach tarot, like, here's what this card is, here's some symbology behind it. It's going to be different for you on your journey, but the way that you talk about it, it's not just a tarot card, it's this entity behind it. It's not just a rune symbol, it's this energetic spirit, or being that is behind it. And so the last time that you and I talked, we were talking about wearing our runes. And so I wanted you to see my eye that I wear.
Oh, yeah. You have it. It's Isa, right?
Yes.
Isa.
Yes. So I
that's a good one.
I wear the ice rune. And so maybe some of you have some scars that match up with runes that might be fun for you to explore too. I want you to tell us a little bit, if you're willing, about your magic path and also your career in nursing and psychology, and just give us a little scoop about that before we go deeper.
Okay, let's see. So it's the short version, right? I would sort of self-identify as what I would call a Northern tradition witch, right? So that's somebody who practices folk magic of Northern Europe. I have teachers from Scandinavia. I have teachers from the United States. I have teachers from England. I've studied with folks to really dive deep into and apprentice in Northern European folk magic. So that's a little bit different than maybe what people might think of typically as heathenry, which is a sort of a different branch of Norse cosmology. And Northern tradition witchcraft and magic and folk magic is related, but not such a sort of container of a religion with gods and goddesses and things like that. So I don't identify as a heathen. I don't identify with any Norse religious organization whatsoever. I'm what you would be called kind of like what they call a trollkvinna, which is a sort of kind of a folk witch, right? Like a Northern tradition folk witch. So it's a lot more about the folk magic of that whole region of the world, right? That has actually survived. It's the lineage that has really kind of lived, it's subsisted there just under the surface of Christianity. So when Christianity came into that whole area of the world at the latest about 1,000 years ago, the folk magic really continued to exist, right? And so, for instance, what you're talking about, Tiffany, people would write runes on themselves, right? Like, even as they were like, they go to church on Sundays and do all those things, but there was still, runes were still being used on, they find rune staves, which are like long pieces of wood where they carve runes. And those were much later, those were in the 12th and 13th century, long after they'd been Christianized. They were still writing runes and sticking them under their bed or, doing different things with them, to kind of keep the magic, keeping that magic alive. So that's sort of my magical tradition, right? And it also feeds in a little bit into where my family is from. My family is from the Ozark region of the United States. And a lot of that folk magic, interestingly, right? It's a weird hybrid, right? It's like Appalachia, similar thing. There's that hybridization of folk magic that really comes down. So it's folk magic in and of itself is like, oh my God, let's not go down that rabbit hole. I'm really trying hard not to. But it's so fascinating to see how much of it all trickles down. And you're like, you do that too? Oh, wow, that too? Oh, with this and on all the correlates is really, it continues. So that's
that's fascinating. Sorry. I think people will love to hear more about that, so feel free, like we're here for the conversation and, to combine those two ancient worlds and those is special and unique and different, and that's how you can kind of weave your own magic. How do you use magic in your life?
Well, I certainly work with the runes, and it's interesting because the runes will work you. So a lot of times when I haven't, like, they'll even show up when I'm not expecting them. Like, I mean, I've had some of the most interesting moments where, like, you'll look up in the branches of the tree and all of a sudden Fehu's looking at you. You know what I mean? Or it's like you'll see these, like, and they'll come. I think the most important thing as a practitioner of magic, or as somebody who's a really, a person who's in sort of that space, at least 1 foot in the magical space at all times, is to just be aware and be curious and observant. Because it's not that, I don't think that magic is something you work. I think it's something that you just sort of experience. And as long as it's kind of at the fore of your consciousness, it's kind of all around you, and it's delightful. You're forever delighted by the experience of these kind of wonderfully amazing runes showing up for you, telling you things like slow down, right? Or, I mean, like, that's what I'm saying. It's like, there's all these ways that it just kind of pops up. But in my sort of day-to-day life, I would say that I do a lot of journey work. I do a lot of working with the runes. I do a lot of plant medicine. I mean, there's this whole other piece that goes towards the holistic nurse part, where I do a lot of holistic medicine. I make a lot of medicine, plant medicine. I work with people in the behavioral health. I'm a psychiatric nurse, and I do a shift a week in a hospital, in a psychiatric hospital here in Austin, Texas. And then I see patients or clients privately for holistic behavioral health work. So there's a deeply clinical piece that I do, and then there's also this other kind of the other end of the spectrum, right? Is this holistic realm where people will come to me and, I know all the medications, I know all of the treatments that they do, I know all about whatever modality of talk therapy, I know it. And I don't discourage that. I never tell somebody not to do that, but there are all sorts of interesting little tweaks that we can help to do to just kind of improve and kind of support and, continue their path maybe a little bit with a little bit greater ease. So that's kind of my clinical holistic piece of this that sometimes feels magical as well, right? I mean, it's kind of all the same. It's like,
that's what I'm saying. Like, I want you
Yeah.
in charge of my healthcare. Like, that's what we need more of, is that blending of things.
Right. Well, and unfortunately, in the medical model, you don't get a lot of time. It's not billable to talk to people about diet. It's not billable to talk to people about lifestyle, right? You don't get paid to do that. So there are a lot of things that, as much as we try to do in the sort of in standard modern medical practice, as a nurse, I feel it as much as anybody. It's like you just don't have the time. You don't have the ability or the capacity to be able to talk to people about a lot of those longer conversations around lifestyle and diet and things like that.
Yeah. So, okay, plant medicine real quick, and then we're going to move forward with more rune talk. If like, there's not a cure-all, right? There's not like a one thing that's going to help everybody, and everybody is in their own different interesting constellation. But if you had a couple of favorites that were like household normals, is there a tea or a tincture that you want to bring to our awareness, that if maybe people are just learning? Didn't mean to put you on the spot. You can come back around to it.
That's a really good. So from a behavioral health point of view, are you thinking?
Yeah.
Sort of like, well, I'll tell you something that is true about plant medicine in general. Typically, when you drink those little tea bags, that's not sufficient amount of plant material to actually get any kind of medicinal dosage, right?
Good.
So from a dosage point of view, this is kind of the nurse talking. Like, if you're really looking for plant medicine, if you're really looking to explore the world of plant medicine, it's going to take more than a little tea bag this size of chamomile tea for you to really get the effect of chamomile, right? Because chamomile is a very potent, effective, useful plant, right? It has some really effective phytochemicals in it, but this much is not going to. That's probably what you give your medium-sized dog, in terms of like dosage, right? It's maybe a 30-pound dog. That's probably the dosage for a 30-pound dog. You know what I mean? So whenever we're talking medicine, whenever we're talking plant medicine, we're always talking dosage in terms of how much plant material is actually being used in order to create that particular medicine, especially in a water base, if you're using for tea, for instance, right? And likewise, if you're looking at a tincture, you want to be sure that if it's tinctured in alcohol, that alcohol is actually the is the thing that is going to pull the correct kinds of phytochemicals that you're looking for, right? Not everything is soluble in alcohol. Not everything is soluble in water. So those are kind of important things. It's a little chemistry, right? But it's also sort of about dosage. And so I think a lot of times people say, well, I drank chamomile tea, but it didn't work. And I'll say, well, how much chamomile did you have in your tea? Right? And I think that's what's really relevant.
And where did the chamomile come from? And was it harvested responsibly? And how potent is it? And
right. And is it 5 years old? And is it, it's like, it's kind of, there's a lot of factors that go into, like, not all plant medicine is the same, right? And not all dosages are the same. So I always think that's a really relevant thing for people, especially when they're getting into becoming curious about what plant medicines are out there for them. That's a good place to sort of start thinking about it. And, I would encourage them to also talk to somebody who works with plant medicine, an herbalist, who can really kind of talk you through what is a dose of what's a good dose of chamomile, because chamomile is that's a great plant, and there's not a whole lot of contraindications for it, right? So there's not a whole lot of things that it's going to mess up if you're taking medication. That's contraindication, meaning, if you're on a medicine and you don't want to inactivate or overactivate or somehow have an adverse reaction to the medicine because of the interaction with the plant, chamomile has a pretty mild side effect profile. There isn't a huge side effect profile, or there isn't a huge interaction profile for it, right? But what is a sort of therapeutic dose of chamomile? And that's a conversation that, you know, I would encourage anyone and everyone who's curious about it to actually talk to an herbalist about.
Yeah, perfect, right? And it individualizes it. It's like there's not a homogenized
Right.
remedy, right? It's like there's not a for anything. So
No.
you know, going deep with somebody that can be help you personalize your experience and kind of follow your own cosmology and design, you know. But okay, cool. So I wanted to touch on that because I knew that people were going to ask all the questions about it. So you got a little bit of that side of Annie, and we're also going to talk about runes. So jumping into that topic for a minute, you know, we've got this class coming up, and I just wanted to see if you could give us a little sneak peek about what you're going to be teaching with the runes without giving it all away. Can you give us a little sample of what you're going to talk about?
Well, we're definitely going to talk about sort of what I was sort of alluding to earlier, which is that, you know, from an animist point of view, I've always been an animist, right? So I'm that's my framework, animist switch. The runes are alive, and they are these energetic beings that are ancient and have always been sort of along for the ride with us, with the caveat that they are so ancient and so enormous that they probably predate human existence and have very little skin in the game for how we're actually doing. So there's kind of a there's not a lot of bias, which is helpful, but also can be quite can be a little bit there's a little bit of an edge, you know, sometimes.
Okay, and are you willing to do a little rune pull for the month of November for our listeners?
Sure.
Okay, cool. Sure. And that way they can kind of get your vibe on how you interpret things. And
for sure.
Cool.
So the way that I typically read runes with folks is we'll pull anywhere from about 1 to 3, starting with 1. But these are enormous energetic beings. They have a lot to say. So you don't need a whole lot. And it's interesting because some people cast runes where they cast it out and then they kind of throw all of them down, and then whatever's face up is kind of interpret. That's a lot of information. So we'll just do 1 to start. Okay. And
I like it.
let me tell you a little something about runes, because runes are different from tarot. I know that you read tarot and you're you're really amazing at tarot. Runes are different in that they do not have a law of contamination.
Okay, can you redo that? Because you were paused for a minute and it was we missed the good stuff.
Sorry.
That's okay.
So the thing about runes that's different from tarot cards is that they do not have the law of contamination. Okay. So, you know, when you touch tarot cards and you have to clear them, right? Once people touch your tarot cards, you have to clear them. That doesn't apply to runes. Runes are usually marked, and these are antler, you can see, and they're blooded. So each one has my blood on it, right? So they're bound specifically to me and only me. And you can't give them to anybody because they just act like petulant children because they only know you. And the only people that you could potentially give them to is maybe your descendants, right? Because there's a recognition. But so when people come and read runes with me, I say touch every single one. Put your hand in the bag and touch every single rune, and then figure out which one's going to kind of stick, which feels sticky, right? So it's a little bit different than tarot reading. Anyway. So just as a contrast, just as a fun contrast, I'm just putting it out there. Okay, yeah. So let's read for November, right? So
okay, yeah.
Where we're at in November. Sound good?
Yes.
So I'm touching every single rune. You hear the?
Yeah. It's like trick or treat.
Yeah, trick or treat. Okay. So what do we have? Ooh. Can you see it?
Yeah.
It looks like a lightning bolt, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so Willow. So Willow.
Okay.
And so Willow is the rune of the sun. So it's
Interesting.
typically it's associated with the sun. But when I see Willow, I think about, now if we're thinking about this as an energetic being who's going to be here, right? All of these energetic beings, there's no good runes, there's no bad runes. They're just these energetic beings. And sort of, if you sort of adhere to Newtonian physics, all things have a push, must have a pull, right? Everything has a sort of, there's this balance, right? And so in the war, and sort of with Willow, we're thinking about the experience of lighting up and then being shown upon. So how does it feel to be shown upon? How does it feel to be the center of attention? How does it feel to be lit up from the inside? And those two opposing experiences, right? So especially in November, you think about, well, there's a lot of family, so potentially with Thanksgiving, right? Everyone's going to be having some family experiences, right? And the push and the pull and the experience of being the center of attention or being the receiver of attention and then being the giver of attention, right? And how that might be wonderful sometimes and a little overwhelming sometimes, right? We can all get kind of burned by the sun, right? So, and so that, you know, there's this is a rune that's going to be moving through and moving with you throughout this month. And as you navigate that pendulum, the trick to really sort of coexisting with these runes in many ways is finding that sweet spot between. And often what I think when you're working with runes, the thing that's really wonderful about them is they help give you awareness. And just that awareness helps you to find that sweet spot in between. You know, you don't have to be always on top of your game. So, you know, for instance, having this awareness of Willow is going to be kind of here, and there's this being the center of attention or feeling, you know, like you have to be the giver of attention, the sort of in the spotlight, under the sun, and the sense of maybe that's a little bit too much. Give yourself a break sometimes, right? Allow yourself to be step in and out of the light. You don't necessarily have to be the center of attention. You don't necessarily have to be the person who's always giving the attention, you know, or receiving it. You can also just kind of step out of the frame for a little bit and give yourself a moment to take a breath, right? That's also totally important and recommended, especially in circumstances where there's a lot of energy that's going to be contained in these family gatherings, right? And in these interactions that are probably a little bit out of ordinary. They're going to tax you more, and they're going to feel a little more intense than, you know, ordinary day-to-day life.
Good point. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And to add to that, astrologically, we've got an eclipse in November, and it's happening on a day where I think it's there's there's a Venus and Uranus transit that same day as that eclipse, which really is about, you know, have you been gaslighting yourself? Have you hidden part of yourself? Is there a part of you that's coming into the light? And the sun, if you think about astrologically, in November moves from Scorpio, right, that dark shadowy side, into Sagittarius, which is much lighter and brighter. And so dancing in between those two worlds, I think, is another way that the Wise Skies people would understand,
right.
You know, this topic.
No, and that absolutely tracks, right? That absolutely tracks. This sense of sort of, you know, how does it feel to stand in the light? How does it feel for you? And is that comfortable or is that uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
And sort of, and just naming that and having an awareness of that, I think, is the part where often, and sort of this goes back to what I had originally said about magical practice, or how do I, you know, what is my sort of walking through the world as a magical person look like? And I think so much of it is just awareness, just having that awareness of kind of what's happening in the background is almost like added information and an added filter to be able to really navigate this stuff, you know, a little bit easier.
And maybe, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, and with the background of the astrology too, it's that sort of like, it's more helpful information to help you kind of see what's happening in real time, right? It's not prognostication. We're not foretelling anything. We're really just kind of checking the temp, checking the energetic, weather, really, right?
Right.
In order to be able to navigate it right.
Yes, that's exactly how I think of it too, right? It's like, can we sail today or not?
Right. Do I need my rain jacket? You know what I mean? Really, it's that's it's not about telling the future. It's really about telling the now. What is this? If we are the proverbial ball inside the pinball machine, you know what I mean? And some of the things that we're paying off of are seen, and some of the things that we're paying off of are not seen. And those unseen things, the more we can get sort of insight into what those unseen things are, maybe the higher our pinball score is, to really carry the analogy out.
Right. No, I love it. And I'm also like, yeah, how can you guys, like, how can we bring that awareness in? And how are you, what is your relationship to the sun? What is your relationship with the sun, the changing of the light, the sun's hours getting shorter? And I also wanted to bring up, you left us a really beautiful journal prompt that I wanted just to share with everybody. So in thinking about November, and you can journal about your relationship with the sun, your relationship with shining your own light, your relationship with illumination, all of those kinds of things. Are you comfortable in your own skin, right? Speaking of like magic and everyday, I was just sitting outside, on my call, and I look over, and in the beautiful fern next to me is this snake that is like twisted up around, and I'm like, oh, lovely. And my dad out here recently got bit, so I'm hyper aware of snakes right now, which I'm very comfortable with as a quadruple Scorpio, right? But just that sudden shift of awareness, it's like, all right, things can change, the shedding of the skin and how that works, but it brings awareness quickly, And so how can you work with the sun energy in that way? Are you going to notice the sun on your little notebook paper? Are you going to notice it on a coffee cup that you didn't really think was that special, and now there's kind of a magical meaning to it? And so I think that could be a fun thing to journal about. But you also had shared one with us about the runes. Would you like to read it, or shall I? Do you have it?
I can read it. Yeah, I have it here. So it's a bunch of questions.
Good.
choose your favorite one.
Good.
So, have you ever felt the influence, presence, or guidance of an energy larger than yourself? It might be a deity, such as a god, or a spirit of an animal, or an ancestor, or even a genus loci, like a spirit of a place. If so, was this presence and guidance welcome and helpful? How did you work with or honor its message and influence? Was it a singular encounter, or is this a guiding presence in your life? So in other words, is it one snake, or is it many snakes?
Many. There's so many.
And then the other thing I think I'd invite folks to sort of think about or explore is, what do you know about the runes? Have you experienced them, or how have you experienced them up until now? And what do you imagine they might have to say to a 21st century mystic such as yourself?
I just love that. Like, I get goosebumps, and I'm like, I want to go journal right now. But I'm going to leave that journal prompt for you guys in the comments there. Please come to our rune class on November 10th. And it's not going to be a normal, traditional by the book. She's not going to read out exactly what the definitions are of each. You don't have to have your own bag of runes to participate. You don't have to have her book to participate, but gosh, don't you want it, And I think, I really appreciate your time in sharing and doing a little mini reading for us, which is actually a macro reading, because I can just feel, like you said, that huge presence. It's so much around just that one symbol, So again, just I thank you for being here and sharing a little bit more of your light and your love with us. And I look forward to class. Is there anything else that you want to share as we're closing?
No, thank you so much for having me. I'm just so tickled to have the opportunity to talk about runes and magic and rebellion. And, you know, I invite you, I'm looking forward to this class because I do think that this is the anti-class, right? Like everything you thought a rune class would be about, this is not going to be that. So if that at all makes you more curious, please come, because we're really taking the rule book and throwing it out the window.
I love that.
Really exploring it for yourself, right? This is all about how the runes are beings that are around you, not around me, not around any expert or there's no bypassing around this. There's no gatekeeping around this. This is only about you and the runes, and so there's no rule book necessary.
Well, I can't wait for class. So I'm super giddy. I hope you have a beautiful rest of October. I hope your medicine gathering is just full of enchantment, and I can't wait to see what you bring back. Guys, just where can they find you online? I'll put that link down there. But
you can find me at AnnelieseJarnsaxa.com, or you can also find me at Calyx Austin, CALYX Austin.com. That's my wellness center here in Austin, Texas.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, thank you, and have a great afternoon, guys.
Thank you so much.